Hello there, watching Al 24 Midnight News, coming to you live from Algiers, and to the headlines. President of the Republic received a phone call from his Palestinian counterpart on the occasion of the advent of the holy fasting month of Ramadan. The office of Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed announced that he had decided to form an interim administration for the Tigray region. Saudi Ministry of Foreign Affairs said that discussions about resuming the provision of consular services are underway between Riyadh and Damascus. In France, over 5 million people participated in the 9th day of protest over the government's pension reform. Hello again and welcome. I'm your host Abdulrahim Kashur, and those were today's top stories. At the beginning, the Algerian President Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune received on Thursday a phone call from the President of the State of Palestine, Mahmoud Abbas. A statement from the Algerian presidency which made it clear that the Palestinian president during the call congratulated President Tebboune on the occasion of the holy month of Ramadan, wishing him and the Algerian people further progress and prosperity. In turn, President Tebboune thanked his Palestinian counterpart for the nobility of his feelings, congratulating him and all the Palestinian people on the advent of the holy month of Ramadan. Still in Algeria's Prime Minister Ayman Ben Abdurrahman and his Tunisian counterpart Najla Bouden held talks on ways to strengthen Algeria's support to Tunisia to restore economic stability. They discussed bilateral relations and opportunities for development in all areas. Bouden updated Abdurrahman on the latest development regarding Tunisia's negotiations with the International Monetary Fund for financial agreements under the extended fund facility, which aims to support economic policies in the country. The Minister of Foreign Affairs and National Community Abroad, Ahmed Attaf, and his Saudi counterpart, Prince Faisal bin Farhan bin Abdullah Al Saud, who congratulated him on his appointment as head of the Algerian diplomacy, reaffirmed during a telephone call the importance of the continuing efforts to strengthen the joint Arab action, indicates Thursday a press release of the ministry. The two parties reviewed on this occasion the Algerian-Saudi relations and expressed their willingness to work together to ensure the proper preparation for the next bilateral meetings to serve the common objectives in the political and economic fields, according to the same source. Secretary General of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and National Community Abroad, Mr. Ammar Bellani, discussed on Thursday with United States Ambassador to Algeria Elizabeth Moore open bilateral relations and the means of developing them in various fields. Both sides also exchanged views on regional and international issues of common interest. They discussed efforts made by the personal envoy of the Secretary General of the United States, or rather the United Nations in Western Sahara, Stephen de Mistura, to revive the process of political negotiations between the Kingdom of Morocco and the Polisario Front in accordance with the UN resolutions. Still with the local matter, Algeria aims to invest $25 billion to develop the hydrogen industry and to strengthen its position in the international energy arena as a basic and a reliable resource in clean energies.
Algeria intends to position itself in the energy arena as a reliable and basic supplier of clean hydrogen, with competitive advantages based on the largest solar energy resources in the world, an extensive energy infrastructure, and a developing industrial fabric. The country aims to inject investments equivalent to $25 billion.
إذا طورنا يعني طاقاتنا في 40 تيراواتر أو يعني ما يعادل.
We have developed our capacity in 40 terawatts, the equivalent of 1 ton of hydrogen. We will invest about 25 billion as a total cost in producing clean electricity through solar energy and wind energy.
The Algerian strategy in developing the hydrogen industry aims to export $10 billion annually and to take over a share more than 10% of the European hydrogen market by 2040.
من بين يعني الأسواق الواعدة لأوروبا هي السوق يعني الجزائرية.
Among the promising markets for Europe is the Algerian market due to its proximity to Europe as they are linked by gas lines. Regarding our preparation for this strategy, our goal was to produce about 40 terawatts in 2014, which means about 1 million tons of hydrogen, which represents 10% of European demand.
The plan, which extends from 2023 to 2050 through 3 stages, includes the conclusion of strategic international partnerships that cover all needed capacities for hydrogen production.
هو نقاش مستمر رانا مع الألمان مع
It is an ongoing discussion with the German, Italians, Chinese, and Arab countries. We are advanced with Egypt in unifying a strategy with regard to hydrogen development.
A long-term strategy aims to create an appropriate and suitable ecosystem for renewable and clean hydrogen development, including industrial integration and the gradual establishment of a national economy of hydrogen and its derivatives.
The Moroccan Observatory Against Normalization, as well as Moroccan human rights activists, are expecting the imminent fall of Morocco as the Makhzen regime buys the sovereignty of the kingdom with the Zionist entity. Mohammed Khatou on What Follow.
The Kingdom of Morocco is on the brink of collapse due to the complete obedience of its regime to the Zionist entity to such an extent that it has become a Zionist protectorate, as described by activists of the Moroccan Observatory Against Normalization and Moroccan human rights activists. The activists warn against an imminent explosion of the Moroccan street, which is suffering the repercussions of an alien social and economic situation. The Makhzen regime's obedience was evidenced by the practices of several Moroccan officials, including Foreign Minister Nasser Bourita, who has become more like an official spokesman for the Zionist entity. He has declared recently that the kingdom intends to push very far its relations with the Zionist occupation through granting agreements, MOUs, and advantages in various fields, in a bid to accelerate the pace of normalization, or rather the Zionist occupation of Morocco, as the Moroccan Observatory Against Normalization put it.
Bourita's statement came even before normalization. It is considered a turning point in our contemporary history. It is a tantamount to a solemn commitment to hand over Moroccan sovereignty to the Zionists and to the global Zionist movement from that time on. Concerned people will be witnessing a series of facts, events and decisions all confirming that Morocco has entered a number of political actors and leaders in the era of the Zionist protection over Morocco or the Zionist occupation of Morocco.
But what is worse and more shocking than all of this is the Makhzen regime's persistence in engaging in a war against Palestine, and the alleged kingdom's commitment to defending the Palestinian cause, refuted by the Moroccan Observatory Against Normalization, in addition to the repression of demonstrations in support for Palestine and the rights of Palestinians to self-determination and freedom.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken told senators Wednesday that the Biden administration is actively working to re-establish a diplomatic presence in Libya. Blinken declined to give a timetable for when the embassy might reopen. The United States has lacked a diplomatic mission in the country since 2014, when more than 150 embassy personnel in Tripoli were evacuated under heavy military escort to neighboring Tunisia and rest in Libyan capital forced American diplomats to withdraw. Senegal's President Macky Sall asked the government on Wednesday to take measures to preserve public order after protests over the trial of opposition leader Ousmane Sonko left at least one person dead. Macky Sall said the government should take all appropriate measures to ensure the absolute security of goods and people. Violence has flared up in several cities since Sonoko's defamation trial opened on March 16, a case that could make him ineligible to contest next year's presidential elections. The office of Ethiopia Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed announced that he had decided to form an interim administration for the Tigray region, headed by the former Minister of Communication and leader of the Popular Front for Tigray, Gatishwe Rida, in implementation of terms of the peace agreement signed between the government and representatives of the region last November in South Africa's Pretoria, and at the terms of November peace deal signed in South Africa's capital Pretoria. The Tigray region agreed to disarm in return for restoration of access to Tigray, which was largely cut off from the outside world during the war.
According to the decision of the Council, an interim administration will be formed for the Tigray region. In its regular meeting held on March 9, the Council of Ministers approved the comprehensive interim administration regulation for the Tigray region.
A 25-year-old Palestinian man identified as Amir Imar Abu Khadij was shot and killed this morning during an army raid of the occupation forces, which seized his house in the village of Isbat Shu'fat, southeast of the northern West Bank city of Tal Quram. In the contest, the occupation forces today detained at least 12 Palestinians in raids at their homes across the occupied territories. The Saudi Ministry of Foreign Affairs said that discussions about resuming the provision of consular services are underway between Riyadh and Damascus. And the Saudi Ministry of Foreign Affairs said that there are existing discussions with the Syrian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, commenting on what some media outlets reported on this matter. The source added, within the framework of the kingdom's keenness to provide the necessary consular services for the two peoples, a discussion is underway between officials in kingdom and their counterparts in Syria about resuming the provisions of consular services. Saudi state media said the foreign ministers of Saudi Arabia and Iran will meet soon to pave the way for reopening embassies and consulates in the two countries. Saudi Foreign Minister Prince Faisal bin Farhan and his Iranian counterpart Hussein Amir Abdullahian arrived at the agreement during a phone call. The International Monetary Fund on Thursday warned that Lebanon is in a very dangerous situation a year after committing to reform it has failed to implement, and urged the Lebanese government to halt borrowing from central bank. The IMF mission chief to Lebanon told a news conference in Beirut that the authorities should accelerate the implementation of conditions set for $3 billion bailout.
We think Lebanon is at a very dangerous moment. It's at a crossroads. We are in a situation where the status quo, the continuation of policy inaction, we think is going to leave Lebanon in a never-ending crisis. We urge the authorities to accelerate the process and to start finally completing all the necessary prior actions that are pending.
More than 1 million people took the streets in cities across France in a protest against President Emmanuel Macron's pension reforms. Violent clashes broke out in Paris, with some protesters throwing stones and fireworks at police and starting fires in the streets. Nabil Khazili tackled the story in this report.
The scene has become familiar now. There were more than 1 million who took to the streets of various French cities to voice their anger on a day described as a Black Thursday. They reject the Pension Reform Act, which the government passed a week ago by resorting to a constitutional article without the need for a parliamentary vote.
The The movement is not over. It will continue. Whatever the future of this movement is, at a minimum, it's going to strongly mark Macron's 5-year term. And maybe it will make history. We don't know.
The latest wave of protests represent the most serious challenge to the president's authority since the Yellow Vest revolt 4 years ago. The protests, now on their 9th day, also disrupted train travel, oil refineries, and saw teachers and workers at Paris Charles de Gaulle Airport walk out of work.
I'm supporting the strike because I think it's a noble cause. I think there were other ways to finance the pensions fund, but the government went on another path.
The French president stressed the need for the law to enter into force before the end of this year, calling on unions to return to dialogue. He said the law would continue its democratic path, which would be reviewed by the Constitutional Council in the coming weeks.
As the leaders of the European Union gather in Brussels, tensions between France and Germany over nuclear energy and the ban of internal combustion engines, or rather engines, threaten to overshadow discussion on economic competitiveness and support for Ukraine. Hussein Burkan.
EU leaders are seeking to address divisions within the Union, with tensions between member countries adding to the challenges faced by the bloc. The summit is expected to focus on economic competitiveness and support for Ukraine, but disagreement between France and Germany over energy policy are dominating the discussions. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz emphasized that the EU is in agreement that vehicles powered by e-fuels should be registered after 2035. However, France is pushing to include nuclear energy as a clean technology, which is opposed by anti-nuclear countries, including Germany.
There is clear understanding within the EU, and this includes the idea signed by all that there should be a regulation proposed by the European Commission that ensures that after 2035, vehicles can be exclusively powered by EU fuels, can continue to be registered. That is already the consensus. That is also the result of the trialogue. And now it is really just a matter of finding the right way pragmatically to implement this promise that the Commission has long since made.
Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, in turn, supports the green transition, but has reservations about binding the EU to specific technologies.
Without prejudice to the objectives of the green transition, which we share, we do not believe that the Union should also be in charge of determining what are the technologies with which to reach those objectives. Also, because there are technologies on which Italy and therefore Europe are potentially at the vanguard of. And with respect to such a hypothesis, to decide to bind ourselves to technologies that instead are in fact held as the vanguard by nations outside the Union, in my opinion, it is a choice that is not supporting to the competitiveness of our system.
Discussions will also focus on enhancing the competitiveness of the European economy in the face of the American Green Economy Plan, which is causing concern among the EU leaders. The summit will continue over the next 2 days, with leaders hoping to find common ground on these important issues.
In Europe still, Finland's president signed the legislation required for Finland to join the NATO bloc in a ceremony held in Helsinki. Finland sought to join the military alliance in response to Russia's operation in Ukraine last year. The Finnish parliament passed the legislation that incorporated NATO's founding treaties on March 1st. Hungary and Turkey, the only NATO members yet to ratify Finland's membership, have signaled that they will do so very soon. The Italian Coast Guard rescued about 750 migrants in 2 separate operations off the southern coast of Italy. The rescue occurred hours after at least 5 people died and 33 went missing in a failed sea crossing from Tunisia. The Coast Guard said they saved about 295 people from a fishing boat intercepted 167 kilometers from the eastern coast of the Calabria region. In a different rescue operation, about 450 migrants were rescued from another fishing vessel about 158 or rather 85 kilometers east of Syracuse in southern Sicily. Now in US, TikTok chief executive faced questions on Thursday from USA lawmakers who are convinced that the Chinese-owned short video app should be barred from being tool of the Chinese Communist Party and because it hosts content that can harm children's mental health. TikTok CEO, meanwhile, Zhou Ziqiu introduced TikTok's effort to protect US users and argued that the app, along with the Chinese parent ByteDance, are owned by global investors, not controlled by Beijing.
In May 20
and to not have a characterization or an agreement or disagreement that you say explicitly with this party policy. It's hard for us to believe what you're saying.
Ending up our news bulletin with sport. Algeria defeated Niger 2-1 in the third round in Group F qualifiers for African Cup of Nations in a game that was held Thursday at Nelson Mandela Stadium here in Algiers. The Algerian national team remained at the top of the group with 9 points from 3 games against Niger, 2 Tanzania and Uganda 1 point each. Coach Jamal Belmadi entered the meeting with a lineup that witnessed several changes, most remarkably the participation of a goalkeeper of Angers, Anthony Mandela, as a substitute for Reyes Wahab Mboulhi, in addition to the presence of Ryan Ayat Nouri in the left-back position instead of Rami Bilsabini. To this end, ladies and gentlemen, thank you ever so much for being with us in this late hour. And I can say for now, and good night.